Before we start this video, a large thank you to Clavicus, Rise, Salt, Concus, Anthony, and Ayub for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support to the channel this month on Patreon. It is immensely appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, and today we're going to start our two-handed system. So here I am in Nephilim. If I hold the two-hand button and hit the right bumper, you can see I will two-hand my right-hand weapon, and my shield goes to my back. So there's a slot back there from the model. Now if I hit the two-hand button again and press the right bumper, I un-two-hand it. If I hit the left bumper while holding the two-hand button, I two-hand my left weapon, and then my right model goes to my back. So when you two-hand a weapon, it just gives you a new moveset. So if I just attack with one hand, you can see there's the strike with the sword. If I two-hand and attack again, you get a different strike. You also get the added bonus of having your strength level halved added onto your current strength. So if you're using a strength scaling weapon, it is a little bit better. So we're going to recreate this. We're going to start today in our project, and I'm going to begin by opening up the player network manager. Now you can put these on the character network manager if you want other characters to two-hand weapons, but for now this is strictly a player behavior. So if you want to make that for your AI, be sure to put it on the character network manager. We are going to cover it later for AI that mimic the player, but that will come in the future. So I'm going to make a header here for two-handing, and then I'm going to say is two-handing weapon. Then I'm going to say is two-handing right weapon, and then is two-handing left weapon. Alright, so we got these bools, and we're basically going to change these, and we're going to trigger some on value changed. So to do this though, we need to actually set up inputs for them. So what we're going to do is go to the interact input and duplicate that, because the interact input is the same as the two-handing input. The difference is you have to hold this input. So we're going to call this two-hand weapon, and we're going to add an interaction for hold, and we're going to change it from a button to a pass-through. Likewise, now we're going to duplicate the right bumper and left bumper inputs here. And this is for, again, two-handing the right weapon and the left weapon. And we're just going to call those two-hand right weapon and then two-hand left weapon. We can keep those pretty much identical to what they were before. We just want them as two separate inputs for the convenience of setting them up. Alright, so this looks good. It's going to drag them in here so they're kind of next to each other. There we go. Now I'm going to close this out and save it. Now let's jump over to our player input manager. And from there we can begin setting up all the input fields. So we're going to start with 3 bools, just like any other input really. It requires a true or false check. And we're going to change that true or false when you press the button or hold the button. So you can make a new header if you'd like. I don't like considering these bumper inputs. I suppose they are, but I like giving it its own header because they're for two-handing. But it is definitely still a bumper, so feel free to put it there. Whatever makes the most sense to you, as I always say. So I'm going to make a bool here for two-hand input, and this is for the holding down the two-hand button before you choose left or right. And then there's the two-hand right and two-hand left weapon input. This is pressing right bumper or left bumper, and these will only really do anything if you're already holding the two-hand input, which, again, on the controller, if you're using an Xbox controller, it's Y. A PlayStation controller, it's triangle. It's the same as our interact button. So down here, I'm going to give two-handing its own little comment here, so we can clearly see the separation between all these different actions or buttons, changing bools and stuff. So I'm going to call this two-hand. I'm going to say player controls.player actions dot two-hand weapon dot performed plus equals I equals greater than two-hand input equals true. And much like we did, I believe, on our blocking, we're just going to use canceled here too. We use this for sprint as well. And when we stop holding the button, it's going to disable this field and change it to false. So we want to do something similar here for, or exactly the same really, for our two-hand left and right weapons. If you're performing them, they are changing the two-hand right weapon and two-hand left weapon respectively to true. And then if you're canceling the input, then it's going to change its bool to false. So if you cancel the two-hand right weapon input, it changes the two-hand right weapon input bool to false. If you perform the input, it changes it to true, and the same is true for the left weapon. So you just copy both of these, and then change the word right in each to left. Be careful you don't miss one if you're doing it very fast. It's very easy to do, and then you won't know why something's busted until you come back here and figure it out. I've been there before a bunch of times. Okay, so now we have all of these inputs set up. They don't do anything yet, so let's make them do something. We're going to create a function here now that's going to basically pass these inputs off and then change some stuff on the player network manager. And when we change those variables, they're going to in turn trigger functions. So I'm going to make a comment here just for two-handing, just right there, or two-hand. I'm going to make a private void for handle two-hand input. Okay. Now I'm going to say if we are not holding the two-hand input, simply return. So everything beyond this point, you have to have that button held down for this to actually do anything. We can start by saying if two-hand right weapon input, we're going to say RB input is equal to false. Why do we do this? Well, we don't want to attack immediately after we two-hand the right weapon. That would be kind of weird. So we're just disabling the attack input here immediately. Now you can, we're also going to put a second safeguard in. I'll show you in a sec. It's not really necessary, but I like having it in case you forget about order of operations, but we'll get that in a sec. So we're just disabling the right bumper input. So we're not actually attacking the second we two-hand our weapon. And you could just put this now before the attack. So that way it just disables the right bumper input after you press this, and that will be enough. So you can put it up here. But if you forget that and it's somewhere else in your order, it's not really that safe. So if we go to the handle right bumper input, we can just simply say if you're holding down the two-hand input, just return, do nothing. So you won't be able to attack when you're holding down the two-hand input, which is how it should be. So even if you miss your order of operations or you forget it, it won't matter. There's a safeguard there. But I just do both just in case. Okay, so now after we've checked that and we've canceled our any possibility to attack, because we're holding on a two-hand button, we want to two-hand a weapon, we don't want to attack, we're going to say two-hand right weapon input is equal to false. And then we're going to say player.player network manager is block and dot value is equal to false, because we don't want to continue a block. We're switching our hands now and changing what we're two-handing, so that should cancel any block. And then we're going to say if player.player network manager is two-handing weapon dot value, well, we want to un-two-hand the weapon. So we're going to say player.player network manager is two-handing weapon dot value is equal to false. And then from there, this will trigger an on-value change function, which we haven't made yet, and that will actually do the whole process of two-handing your weapon. I'm going to return there, and that's it. And otherwise, if you are not two-handing a weapon, well, you want to two-hand specifically the right-hand weapon. So we're going to say is two-handing right-hand weapon dot value is equal to true. And this will trigger an on-value change function, and that will handle two-handing the right weapon, putting the model in the proper place, yada, yada, yada. So the same thing is done for the left weapon, so we can pretty much duplicate this identically. I'm going to make some comments here so it's very clear. If we are already two-handing a weapon, then we change the is two-handing bool to false, which in turn is going to trigger an on-value changed function. So that's going to go to the player equipment manager, and it's going to put your weapons back in the right place. So if you have something on your back slot or your hip slot, it'll put it back in your offhand, and everything will go back to normal. Set up your animator controller overrides, and refresh your damage colliders. Your damage colliders need to be refreshed because you get a strength bonus from two-handing a weapon. So when you un-two-hand it, it should be recalculated. But we'll get to that in a bit. So another comment down here, if we are not already two-handing a weapon, change the right two-hand bool to true, which triggers an on-value change function. This function two-hands the right weapon. All right, cool. Now let's take this and duplicate it in its entirety. And then we're going to paste it right below. We say else if two-hand left weapon input. Want to change the LB input to false. Want to change the two-hand right weapon input to two-hand left weapon input. Basically, wherever you see right, change it to left and take your time. And wherever you see RB, which is just that one place, change that to LB. This is all the same, this first part of the function here. The second part right down here is going to be changed to the left weapon. And that's it for your inputs. That part is done. It's really that simple. Why is this all right, capital H? And I didn't capitalize the H in two-handing right, so I'm going to fix that right now because that will bother me. I didn't even notice that. There's probably other stuff I'm not noticing too, but I'm sure I'll notice it eventually and fix it. Okay, so now let's go over to the player network manager, and we can say public void on is two-handing changed. So what does this do? Well, this is just going to check and see if it's false. And if it is, it's going to on-two-hand the weapon, because on-two-handing a weapon is going to do the same thing regardless of which weapon you had two-handed. It's just going to refresh both your weapons and put them both in their proper slots. So if we're not two-handing our weapon, dot value, we want to run a function on the player.player equipment manager called on-two-hand weapon. Now, this isn't made yet, so let's just make an empty function here so we don't get an error. And then we'll actually make this later on. So let's jump over to the player equipment manager. And again, if you want this on AI right now too, you can put this on the character manager and override this, the character equipment manager, and override it here, make it a virtual void. You want some functionalities different for your player. but I'm going to put it here for now because we're going to keep it very simple. So public void on two-hand weapon. Let's just make a bunch of comments here about what we want to do. Let's set up all of the actual interlocking pieces before we do the last bit of logic. So we want to update the animator controller to the current main hand weapon, because you're not two-handing anything anymore, so your default controller is your main hand weapon. We want to remove the strength bonus you get when two-handing a weapon. So as I said before, it's, I believe, your strength level plus half of your strength level. So if you had 66, your strength level will be at 99 when you're two-handing your weapon. So we're going to add an effect for that too. That just gives you that bonus purely when you're two-handing a weapon. We'll use our character effects manager. And then we're going to say on two-hand, the model, so change your animations basically, and move the on two-handed model, if it does exist, out of the back slot or hip slot or wherever you have it, wherever you put it back to its proper hand. So if you're two-handing your left weapon, you have your right weapon on your back, your right weapon goes back to your right hand, your left weapon goes back into your left hand. If you're two-handing your right weapon and your left weapon is on your back, then your left weapon goes back to its left hand and you just stop holding the right weapon with two hands. So then we're going to refresh the damage collider, as I said before, because you would have had a higher strength level when you're two-handing a weapon. So the scaling will be affected. You'll get slightly more damage. So we want to refresh that and recalculate it. An important note here is that whenever you're two-handing a weapon, the model will always rest in your right hand. So if you're two-handing your left weapon, temporarily that left weapon's model will be held in your right hand. This is just to make life easier for animating. So we want to put those back in their proper places, obviously. So then we're going to say a public void on is two-handing right weapon changed. And we're just going to pass old status and new status or bool. And we're not going to put anything here right now. Let's just duplicate this and make one for is two-handing left weapon changed, like so. And now we want to basically go over here again and copy the current weapon being used int up here at the top, and we're going to change this to current weapon being two-handed. So basically the same variables you use normally, so your current weapon being used and your current weapon being used ID, we're going to use those again for the current two-handed weapon. This just keeps it really easy to track what's going on when you do network options with a two-handed weapon, and it's just so much easier to keep track of this. So on is two-handing right weapon change, we're going to say current weapon being two-handed dot value is equal to our current right hand weapon ID dot value, just like that. So we're not done yet. We have to change the two-handing bool now to true. So is two-handing weapon dot value is equal to true. And then we're going to come right below that. And we're going to go and make another variable here in the player inventory manager. So public weapon item current two-handed weapon. So we have a current right-hand weapon, current left-hand weapon, and current two-handed weapon. The current two-handed weapon must be obviously one of these two, but we're going to keep track of it as a separate variable because it just makes life so much easier. So we're going to say player.playerInventory.current two-hand weapon. In this case, this is my right weapon, so it's going to be playerInventory.current right-hand weapon, because as you can see, this function is called on is two-handing right weapon changed. So if we are doing that, we want to just go over here and say our current two-hand weapon is our current right-hand weapon. Then we're going to say player.playerEquipmentManager.two-hand right weapon. Okay, so we can copy all of this now and paste it down here and change right to left, and that's it. So it's going to work the same way here. So when we are two-handing our right weapon, we do all the following. When we are two-handing our left weapon, we do all of the following. Now this function does not exist yet either, so let's just make the two shells of these functions, and we can add some pseudo code to them to see what they're going to do. So I'm just going to copy this function, paste it down here. I'm going to change on two-hand weapon to two-hand right weapon, and I'm going to delete all the comments we have inside here because it doesn't apply to this function. Then I will copy and paste this function here, two-hand left weapon. Now we can write some pseudo code to see what we want to do here. So let's just go up here, and we're going to start by saying, because it's going to be basically the same for both of these, except you swap the left weapon for the right weapon, obviously. So one, check for on two-handable item, like unarmed. I think unarmed actually is the only thing. So if you're attempting to two-hand unarmed, you just want to change the is two-handing weapon bool to false, change the is two-handing right weapon bool to false, and just simply return. So again, the second part of this will be to just reset all of your two-handed flags if you're attempting to two-hand unarmed. So I will say if we are returning and not two-handing the weapon, reset bool. All right, so what's next? Put two slashes here at number 3. We are going to say place the non-two-handed weapon in its proper slot. So You might want it to go in the hip slot. You might want it to go in the back slot. I have a system in my game that just looks at the weapon class, and depending on the class, it'll put it in a slot. So I have daggers on my hips usually, and then bigger weapons on the back. So we can set that up too, but we'll start by just doing the back slot to keep it simple. So then we're going to say place the two-handed weapon model in the main, so right hand. Like I said before, even if you're two-handing the left weapon, although it is your left weapon, you want the left weapon's model to go in your right hand. So you're always holding it in your main hand. And then when you un-two-hand it, the model goes back into your left hand, which is why we keep track of the models separately, mostly for this purpose. It helps to do so for other reasons as well, but this is the main portion that makes it easier to keep track of. So I'm just going to copy and paste this in the two-hand left weapon section there as well, because it's basically the same. Now we can actually make a header here to make this a bit more organized. I'm going to say weapon model instantiation slots. These are where can they appear. Your right hand, your left hand weapon slot, your left hand shield slot, your back slot, your hip slot. These are where the weapons can be basically placed, the models specifically. Then we have the weapon managers. That's how you handle your damage cladders and all that good stuff. And then we have the models specifically. So the right hand weapon model is the model of your right hand weapon. The left hand weapon model is the model of your left hand weapon. Now you could put the left hand weapon's model in your right hand slot if you're two-handing it. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So let's make another weapon model instantiation slot and call it the back slot. If we go down here to start, no, it's on awake. We initialize these. Right, cool. So let's go to this function where we get all of our slots, and let's just add another else if statement here because we want to also be searching now for the back slot. So we're going to say if weapon slot dot weapon slot is equal to back slot. That doesn't exist yet. We're going to say back slot is equal to weapon slot. So let's go to our enums. Under weapon model slot, we have a comment here for back. Let's erase the comment and let's just call it back slot. I'm just going to move it up here too, like so. All right, we're good to go. That looks good. Okay, let's jump back to the player network manager. On is two-handing right weapon changed, we want to say if is two-handing right weapon dot value is not true, want to simply return. Want to do the same thing on the is two-handing left weapon dot value. And also we want to encapsulate these two network variables in an if statement, checking if we are the owner. We don't want to run these if we're not the owner. So we're going to say if is owner, then do these two things. And then regardless if you're the owner or not, we want to do both of the final things there, both of the last things. Okay, looks good. Now we want to call this, or rather we want to link it up with our bools when they change. So go to the player manager. And I'm going to make another section down here for tuning the weapon. I'm going to say two-hand, I'm just going to say player network manager dot is two-handing weapon dot value, or dot on value change, sorry, plus equals player network manager is on is two-handing weapon changed. So again, player network manager dot is two-handing weapon dot on value changed plus equals player network manager dot on is two-handing weapon changed as in our function. Do the same thing for the right weapon now on the left. So player network manager is two-handing right weapon dot on value changed plus equals player network manager dot on is two-handing right weapon changed. And again, finally, the same thing for the left weapon. Player network manager dot is two-handing left weapon on value changed plus equals on is two-handing left weapon changed. Make sure you go to on network despawn and unsubscribe from these functions too by using the minus equals like so. And now we have everything hooked up. So we can actually start writing the logic now that will actually move around the models and do all the visual stuff. So before we do that though, we want to go to load other player characters when joining server and sync the two-handed status, because remember these only trigger when the value has changed. So if you join when the value is already true, it's not going to trigger the function to two-hand the weapon. So we do that by saying player network manager on is two-hand or right weapon changed. So on is two-handing right weapon changed. Pass the right weapon value and do the same thing with the left and pass the is two-handing left weapon value. All right, cool. So let's save that. We jump back to the player equipment manager and you have all these comments here for what you need to do. And I think this is a fantastic place to end this video because this will give some of you the chance to attempt to put all this stuff in yourself. So I highly encourage you to go and take a whack at it. You have all the pseudo code here. You have a direction. You have the knowledge and the know-how. We've used weapon equipment slots before. We've used our right hand slot, our left hand slot, our left hand shield slot. So go ahead, add a back slot and try to make it so you switch the animations. That's a bit of a tougher part too. And you're actually putting the weapon that isn't being two-handed on your back. So In the next episode, we will get to doing just that. Thank you all very much for joining me again this weekend. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. As always, an immense thank you to my Patrons, because of each and every one of you, I get to keep doing this, and I love doing this. Also, shout out to each and every one of you who take the time to like the videos and comment. It does genuinely mean the most. I will see you guys next week.